Michael, go ahead.
All right, welcome everyone. I think everyone should have in front of them an agenda and some reading materials, which is a little intimidating, but I'm sure we'll add to that along the way and make it even more intimidating. I am going to sit in the seat for a little while until you all select a chair, and then I will vacate this seat and let someone else take over. What we plan to do today is get to know one another a little bit, review the task at hand, review some of our obligations for transparency. The city attorney, Neil Bruntrager, will help us with that, elect some officers, and then go through very briefly the recommendations from staff and from council members of things that you might look at. Keep in mind, we are allowed, we being staff and the council, we're allowed to suggest things to you. You frankly aren't required to listen to us, although we hope you will at least consider these things along the way. I do really appreciate you all being here. One of the questions we asked you was about time commitments and did you have enough time? And so I know that you all take this very seriously because every single one of you said you're willing to spend the time doing this. So for myself and the council and the city staff, thank you for that. We greatly appreciate it. So what we're going to first do is do some introductions. And if I was good, would have brought in an icebreaker question and you would tell us something like, I don't know, the town you were born in. No, we don't want to do that. That's too close to home in Webster Groves. But why don't we just, introduce yourself, tell us anything that you would like to have us know about you. And I'm going to have staff start first for a change, get everybody warmed up. So we will start with Dr. Marie Peoples, our city manager. Yes. Do you want to explain how microphones work while you're doing this?
So the mics on the dais are typically on. You do occasionally go off, and if that happens, Eric, you may see him come over your shoulder and assist a little bit with that. You do need to speak into the microphone though, because of course we are recording and we want people to be able to hear us later or as they're watching at home. For those of us that are at the table, you do have to push the button on for the microphone or stop when you're done speaking. Restrooms are out and to the left. I think that's pretty much all of the housekeeping tips. Please ask the question. So Eric, whoever else is here, we want to accommodate you to the best we can. Please let us know if you have other questions or needs. You have a bunch of materials you'll go through later. Hopefully you'll find them useful. If you find you would like other materials, which you all will talk about as a group, happy to get any printed copies for you as well. So I'm Marie Peoples. I'm the city manager and I kind of like the town thing. So I was born in Port Leonard Wood, Missouri. So there you go. That's my news for the day.
I'm waiting for the good parts. My name is Neil Bruntrager, and I have been city attorney of Webster Groves for 4 years come this December. I have a lot of experience in municipal government and in governmental entities in Missouri, and doing this in practice law for 49 years. I live in Webster Groves, and I've lived here for 33 years. I will make myself available to you all, and I will tell you that in the course of things, you will have questions. I'm here to help. I'm here to assist. You are the decision makers. I'm here to basically provide information, background information, legal information that you may have regarding the charter, regarding the statutes that affect the cities, just general information that you might have. We'll figure out a way for you to get information to me. I want to make sure I respond to you in a reasonable time. Get things back to you in a time that will make it useful to you in terms of your decision making. I can help you with the outside things. I can also help you with some internal matters if you have those regarding structure and that sort of thing. I do have some recommendations when you do get to this issue regarding how you're going to start meetings, about how to do that in those ways. The idea is ultimately to make your meetings useful. So again, the idea is not to have you come and ask questions and I'll say, yeah, I'll get back to you, and you might have to wait a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks before you get an answer. The idea is to be able to answer your questions when you come to the meeting so that this information is both timely and useful. So again, I'll do my very best in that regard, but we'll try to structure this in such a way that I'm not getting 30 questions at a time. Again, I'm happy to answer them. So I'm here to be a resource for you. That's my only purpose. I will be quiet unless you ask me questions. Thank you.
Eric Peterson, I'm the Assistant City Manager. My role with you all is just to simply run the Zoom and help manage the meeting. So unless I'm presenting, so myself or Jenny Starkey, the Public Affairs Director, will be in this seat often when you're meeting.
I'm Michael Yoakley. I'm a resident of Webster Groves for over 50 years. And this is my first time to actually get physically involved, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity. I'm a father of one daughter and about 8 grandchildren. And this is something I'm really looking forward to, working and sharing ideals and trying to make Webster a growing community as it progresses.
Hello, my name is Kyle Klemp. I'm not originally from Webster Groves, but after a long home search, I'm glad that this is where I live now. And I'm excited to, put my input into this great city that I care so much about. Thank you.
I'm Jeannie Kirkton. I was born in St. Charles, Missouri. I've lived here since 1980. I was a nurse by profession. I've served on the city council here for 2 years and in the Missouri House for 8 years. And my family's here. I have 2 grandchildren and a rescue dog.
So I am Laura Arnold, Mayor of Webster Groves for, I think, 6 months, maybe going on 7 months now. And I grew up here, since we're answering that question, but ran away for 15 years and had to come back when I had kids. So, and again, thanks for being here and your attention and your just willingness to help our city.
I'm Matthew Heil. I was born in Cleveland. So at the time when the river was burning, so we had running river in the world. But I've been in Webster now for 30 years. I'm a retired professor. Sorry. Okay. So working now?
Yep.
Okay. And I've been involved in a number of organizations helping write their operating rules. So I've done this sort of thing for other organizations. And this is my first time doing something other than voting in Webster and putting out yard signs. So I was excited about the opportunity.
I'm John Eppers. I was born and raised in Shrewsbury. We moved back to Webster Groves about 10 years ago. I briefly ran for city council and got me very interested in what's going on when I built my garage and everything. And that's why I'm involved in what's going on here. We need to change a few things, and I think we can work together and make this a better community for all.
My name is Joe Dugan, and I live in northwest corner of Webster up by Rock Hill and Glendale. Lived here since 1996. I was born in Troy, Missouri, but my father, who at that point worked at McDonnell Douglas, decided to become a farmer, and we ended up in rural Missouri, North Missouri, grew up there, went to Mizzou and worked in Kansas City and eventually Washington, D.C. for 10 years, and then got a job back here in St. Louis, and then eventually got hired on with Fleischman Hillard Public Relations and been working that for 25 years. And this is also my first time being involved in something of this nature, other than working on a nonprofit and doing some volunteer stuff. So I look forward to the challenge. Thank you.
My name is Nicole Chaput. I grew up in Chicago and moved to St. Louis in 91 to go to law school and moved to Webster in 96. I have 2 kids, 2 daughters and 2 cats. And my prior involvement with the city, I was on the Plan Commission many years ago. A few years ago, I was on the library board, and I'm looking forward to getting back into this again. It's a bit of a busman's holiday for me, a big part of my job. I'm the attorney for a wealth management company, so I do a lot of statutory review and getting people used to new laws and managing our policies and procedures. So I don't know, there might be something wrong with me, but I thought it sounded interesting to have the opportunity to do that with you folks and to help the city and get back engaged again.
Hi, is it on? I'm Tammy Bain. I own Maypop. We've lived in Webster Groves, my family, for over 20 years, but I grew up in North County in the Ferguson Florissant area. And we've raised 5 boys through Webster and the school systems. And are just looking forward to becoming a part of this process and helping any way we can.
My name is Paul Driven, and I've lived in Webster Groves for 25 years. Have a wife and 2 kids and 5 grandkids. That keeps us busy. My background is in housing and urban development, and I look forward to being a part of this committee and hopefully making Webster even a better place.
My name is Melissa Johnson. I'm here for 16 years this month. I believe the Colonel's holding the little period when we get we have 3 kids currently in the public school system, and this is the first that I'm getting involved in city government. I'm very involved, very interested in politics and getting involved, and really want to be a part of the city and us moving forward. So very excited to be here.
Great. Jenny Starkey, will you wave to everyone? Eric made mention that you will sometimes be helping us with our technology here in our meetings. And so this is Jenny, everyone. You've searched everyone out at this point, huh? Oh, you did? Oh, wow, that was fast. All right, next on our list of items for today is governance. And the idea is to elect a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. And if you don't mind, I'm going to take a minute and talk about those responsibilities. So one of the things I've learned as mayor very quickly is that being the chair of the council as mayor doesn't mean that I get any more authority. So the chair, whoever's chair here, you get no more authority than any of the other members of the commission, your board. It really just means that your job is to invite participation from everyone, make sure everyone is heard from. It means helping set the agenda with Dr. Peoples. It also means keeping us focused and productive so that we are not straying down. So we're not straying. Let's just leave it at that. And then also keeping us focused and productive, sticking to the agenda that we have. And then finally, going back one more time to emphasize that we want all the voices to be heard. One of the things that was really striking about interviews from many of you who are here right now is the degree to which people said they're interested in listening, which is great. But we want to make sure that everyone has a chance to speak as well, because you need something to listen to along the way. So that would be the chair. The vice chair then would preside if the chair was unable to do so, and depending on how whoever's elected chair feels, may participate also in the setting of the agenda as well. We are going to ask you all to select a secretary. All of these meetings will be recorded. So we're not asking for minutes that are detailed minutes. We're asking for minutes that just include action items. So was there a motion and it passed? Did we ask for a specific piece of information or a specific kind of expert? Those things will be in the minutes, but we're not talking about saying, well, Tammy said this, and then Kyle said that. We don't need that because of the recording that's happening. So the job of secretary would be taking a very abbreviated or what we would call action-oriented minutes. The process for doing this then is we'll do chair first, then vice chair, then secretary, and we're just going to ask you all to self-nominate. If you're interested in serving in one of these positions, I will just ask you to nominate yourself. If there's more than one person, each of you can give us a moment or two of why you think you'd be good at that particular job, and we will right out of the gate start voting on things. All right, so is there anyone who is interested in serving as chair? Matthew and Jeannie. All right. Sorry, my pen has a. Okay, so then if you would each just take a moment, say 2 minutes, to tell us why you think you might be good at this job, and the rest of us then will, well, I don't get to vote, so I don't know why I'm saying us. The members of the board then will have an opportunity to make a selection. Matthew, would you like to go first?
Sure. So as I said before, I have chaired committees doing this kind of work previously. I have taught group work and how to do meetings in summer schools for lay leaders around the country. So I've got a lot of experience in running and managing groups, looking at organizational structures. So that's been really my experience. And I've had years in the academic areas working with groups as well, but it's really those other experiences I think that fit best with this.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Jeannie?
Thank you. I think my, and I'm going to date myself, my experience goes back into my nursing career in the late 70s, serving on committees and heading departments. I served also on the committees in the Webster Groves City Council, the Sustainability Commission, chaired that. The library board as a liaison, we did a lot of strategic planning and focus groups there. And then in the Missouri House, on the policy committees and various other committees, budget and mental health, health and mental health. And my philosophy is one of openness and working with respectability, respectful of others' opinions and their time, and working hard to give due diligence to our task at hand.
Right, so Mr. City Attorney, I probably need someone to move to select, no?
You haven't yet adopted Robert's Rules of Order, which you don't need to, okay? So at some point, because you are at this point simply making choices to run, you can adopt or not adopt Robert's, it's up to you. But at this point, we could just do a vote without a second.
Okay.
I mean, does anybody know
So-
anybody else here? I mean, you probably can't make a second. Be stuck where if you were going to, and maybe we could just get a blind second. But I don't think we should do anything for the sake of just doing it. So these
Gotcha.
two have self-nominated, and at that point, I think you just put it to a vote.
Okay, so what we will do then, I will ask for those who are in favor of Matthew, and then Jeannie, obviously you pick one. Welcome to the world of stating your preferences in public, because we're gonna have to do that a lot. So all those in favor of Matthew as chair, please raise your hand. I think we can do it that way. All those in favor of Jeannie as chair, please raise your hand. Wow, look at the two contestants here, not even voting. Wow, you guys are great. I believe that Jeannie has it in the votes. I then get to move out of this chair. So I'm going to go down there. You all may want to move closer here. Sorry, Jeannie, I have way too much stuff to move very quickly.
Or again, because you can do whatever you want, you don't have to move. You can
Yeah, you
right
can
there.
stay there, yeah, but I'm gonna go down there because that's gonna be my usual seat and that's a non-voting seat and it's probably better if I get used to that part.
You get the gavel.
Maybe. Thank you all for your confidence and support, and Matthew, thank you. So we'll move on to the election of the vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair? Nicole and Matthew have both self-nominated. Nicole, I think you raised your hand first. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So I have had, in my most recent role at work, a lot of experience leading our group through a lot of change. Our company's been growing quite a lot and changing in a lot of ways. And my style has been to include, anybody who could possibly be affected by a decision that we're making, and respecting where we are and how we got here, but also working in a cohesive manner to pull everybody together to get a vision for how we want to move forward. And I think that would be very applicable to this position as well.
Matthew?
Well, I've already
You wanna-
spoken. So. Although it didn't work.
But you can add on if you want.
No,
Okay.
I'm good.
So we'll go ahead and move for the vote for vice chair. Everybody in favor of Nicole, please raise their hand. And everybody for Matthew, please raise your hand.
3 and 3.
3 and 3.
Well, I guess we didn't vote.
No.
4-4.
It wouldn't make any difference.
So in the event of a tie, do we have abstentions?
There isn't any. There's
Everybody
just
vote?
one absent.
Okay. In the event of the tie, I think we gotta do it again. Or you can have two vice chairs. But you sort of have to have a senior and a junior vice chair.
What's the preference of the committee? Two or do it again?
Forgive my ignorance, but can the alternate members vote?
No. Do we have the alternates here?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You guys can do anything you want in that regard. If you want to give the alternates a vote, you can.
Yeah.
Okay, let's redo the vote and include the alternates, please. Everybody for Nicole, please raise your hand. 4. And for Matthew? 3. Okay, now it's 4-3. Congratulations, Nicole.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to election of secretary.
Can I, Madam Chair, can I say one thing about secretary? This sort of goes with what the mayor has already said. Don't anyone be concerned about the amount of work that the secretary will be required to do, because it's not a daunting task. The minutes are mandated because we are a public commission. The minutes are mandated by the Sunshine Law. But it does not require, as the mayor said, a verbatim. Because these things are recorded, all you have to do is generally reflect the topics that were discussed. And the only thing you really must include are the votes. So again, the votes have to be recorded, both who made whatever motion was ultimately voted on, and who seconded it, and then how people vote. So again, as you're doing the minutes, people think I got to do this verbatim. It's not a big task, because we also do record these things. So don't be worried that it's going to be an overwhelming task.
Thank you. Any nominations for secretary?
I will be
Oh.
secretary.
Thank you. Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you. Second is nomination.
I think we can vote by acclamation for Kyle. Okay. All right, we'll move on to organizational processes and discuss rules and procedures. Neil, is this where you come in with Robert Rules of Order?
I can. And so one of the things that's in your mind is Robert's Rules of Order in a general sense. Robert's rules are generally used by public commissions and public meetings. The importance of Robert's Rules is that it helps us in those events where two things, where we have a contentious group or where we have a large group. Okay, so again, I wouldn't be overwhelmed by the organizational element of Roberts and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Don't worry about that. We have lots of parliamentarians who can help you through it. But the truth of the matter is, it really should be the sort of situation when you won't find yourselves, at least I hope you don't, find yourself in a situation where you're really going to have to rely on them. So I would recommend that you adopt them, because in the absence of adopting something, the Sunshine Law says that Roberts apply. But again, it's up to you. I do encourage you to have some structure there in the event that ultimately it becomes necessary. But in the general structure of the meetings, don't be overwhelmed by them.
So I would assume then that our rules would require a quorum and all those other things.
And those are going to be set by statute. So the Sunshine Law says that we have to have a quorum because you are a public body. We have to have a quorum to act and all that sort of thing. Again, the format of it is really Roberts generally, and so I would encourage you to adopt.
Okay, so I would make a motion that the committee adopt Robert's Rules of Order as our foundation.
Can we have some discussion about that?
Oh, yes, of course.
May I?
Yes.
So one of the things that was stressed in our interviews and in the council is that they wanted people to listen to a broad number of folks in the community and wanted us to pay attention to those people and to hear their voices. So that really says that, to me, I've been thinking about this a lot, that as a group, as a whole, if we can agree and move on with things, then the whole community represented here will also be more likely to agree. And so what I would like to suggest is that we utilize a consensus procedure for voting rather than Roberts. So Roberts was created in the 1800s. It's now 700 pages long. So it reflects what was thinking about groups and management in the 1800s. Consensus is a more reasonable thing. And I have a one-page description of a straightforward consensus process. That if we don't reach consensus, then there can be votes. I mean, that's perfectly reasonable. But the goal is to try to identify from everyone, even people who are opposed or at different sides, what the basis is of their thing, and to try to come up with ideas and proposals that will meet both sides. Rather than a majority rule, it really is a group working together. So I really would like to, based on the way the council asked us to think about this task, I would like to suggest that we utilize something of that sort. And I have been in administration and on boards that has used this quite successfully.
Madam Chair, are we open for a discussion at this point?
Yes, please go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Matthew, I like the concept here, and I think this could be, a good, perhaps an approach for our deliberations down the road as far as we're working through issues that come before the commission and items that we discuss. But I do have concerns about just using it as our rules of order for the meetings themselves. And just because it's a different approach, I think there would just be more familiarity with following Robert's Rules of Order. Thank you.
Matthew, I maybe I'm not following correctly, but my gut instinct is that the working relationship of this committee will be a consensus, but I think, Neil, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but because we're a public body, we do have to have recorded votes on things. Correct?
And this does have that.
Yeah. So my perspective is that this body would work like this in a consensual manner, but still, like Joe said, adopt Robert's Rules of Order. Because I think we'll need that should we come to some kind of roadblock. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Ultimately, we have to have some vehicle for making a decision and recording the vote. Okay, because in the end, you're going to be asked to make decisions. And those decisions, and this doesn't necessarily exclude that.
Right.
It is a process that frankly is very similar to what I think our council does in terms of the way they do
Right.
things, but ultimately it does fall back to a vote where there's a motion and a second and there's conversation. So I don't think that this is necessarily exclusive of that process. It could be an overlay on the rules. It's just your approach to it, which is why I say, don't get too caught up in the formality of Robert's rules.
Mhm.
If this is a more comfortable way to do business, that works as well. So
Okay. So,
If I may just interject for a second, this is exactly what my view of how we should operate as a council is this is the first line of how you behave is
Right.
seeking that consensus. And if you then have to go to the next step, which is the more formal process, you can do that. I just want to reiterate, as Neil said, they're not mutually exclusive here necessarily.
does that work for you?
Sure, we
Matthew?
could start. No, because the last thing, if we can't reach consensus, then there's a vote, which would fit perfectly well. And the consensus process is recordable and positions are recorded.
So would we need to add this to our paperwork?
well, what I would suggest is that if you're going to adopt this alone, you would add it to your paperwork and we would publish this as part of your rules, okay? If the idea is to adopt Roberts as a fallback, but this is sort of a working format, then again, you can do the same thing, but you would first adopt Roberts rules and then this is a secondary part. And Roberts would be a fallback in the event for some reason this would fail.
Okay. So may I move that we adopt Robert's Rules of Order?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, so
And then
moved.
As a secondary, if you wish to move for this as a process by which to handle the meetings individually, you can do that because again, they're not exclusive. I don't think they're.
Okay, all right. So then I make a motion that we adopt the consensus decision-making. There a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One nay. The motion passes. Okay, our next item is discuss future meeting schedule.
Jeannie, can I ask you all to consider one thing before we move on for this? And I should have mentioned it to the city manager and the city attorney. The role of the alternates is not clarified very much within the statute. Council discussion was, and I think by statute, they don't have a vote unless you give them a vote, sort of in the case you did just a few minutes ago. But the council expectation is that there will be full participation in discussion and questions and things like that. It's your decision to make, but I just wanted the council's position to be known before we move ahead.
And if I may, part of the reason that that is important is that in the event that you don't have a quorum of
Right.
regular members, if they're granted a vote, then you would always have a quorum if the alternates show up and yeah, it's up to them.
Okay. So I make a motion that the alternates have a vote if so needed.
Second. I second.
Any discussion?
Just a question. The process of the alternates, that they would help make a quorum and could vote then, and then if the other regular members show up, then does that alternate then fall back into the alternate position again?
Up to you. Okay, so it can be both ways. You could have them as alternates voting. So we see this, for instance, in things like grand juries, okay, where again, any number, you have regular members, you have alternates, any number to show up to vote, they're given the vote. In this instance, you could make a determination that they would be able to vote all the time. So that instead of 9 members effectively voting, you would have 11, although it would always show that there are regular members voting this way and the alternates voting this way. Okay, but they would still have the same equal vote. Does that make sense? Am I answering your question? Yeah.
So are we suggesting also that then there would be part of discussion? So, you know, when there's a motion made and things like that, that if they had questions or wanted to discuss some aspect, it would be a part of that.
Yes.
Okay. So I move that that the alternates have a vote and may participate in discussion, even if there is a quorum.
Second.
Second. Any discussion?
My only question, and I guess this would be for you, how does that make this any different than an 11-member body?
Well, because the charter says 9, but it does provide, although not directly, but it does provide for alternates in this manner. So again, all you're doing at this point is making sure the support really doesn't change that. Does, I guess, to some extent, dilute your vote from 1/9 to 1/11. But again, if you don't think that makes a difference, that's up to you. But I come back to this. You guys get to make this call. The charter says it's up to you. You decide how you're going to run your meetings and who does what. And as long as it's not in opposition to the charter, you're fine. You have the authority to do anything that you do.
So would the figure of a quorum then be based on 11 or not?
It would still be based on 9 because the charter says 9 is the group.
So could we modify the motion that the votes of the alternates would count in the event that the quorum was not met by the 9 members?
Could indeed.
Mhm. Yeah, let's
I think that
do
makes
that.
sense.
So if that is made in the form of a motion, that should be seconded. And then we in turn will vote on the amended motion. You just had your first lesson in Robert's rules.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? One opposed. The motion carries.
It was the amendment. So
The
we need to
amendment.
go to the original as amended.
Right. Are there anything that we're overlooking as further in this section? Okay. We'll go on to discuss the future meeting schedule.
So Madam Mayor, or excuse me, Madam Chair, if I can, you do have one absence right now. So you can determine should you wish to elevate an alternate for the remainder of the meeting,
Okay.
not to complicate your day a
Yeah.
little more.
First day on the job.
That was the motion. The elevation is for both of them, I believe, the way the motion, that way. you don't have to pick which
Yeah. I don't want to pick.
one. No.
Okay. All right. Future meeting schedule. I'm kind of at a loss on this because we have a lot of things to discuss under this, and that may determine how we decide when to meet again. Is it okay if we skip this and come back?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The next one is discuss desired trainings. Diversity, equity, inclusion through a policy lens, forms of local government, model city charter, and others not specified. Is there discussion on any trainings that people would like to have?
I would definitely be interested in the forms of local government. I think, the best people copy what everyone else is doing. So we should look at, and I assume that's what this is about, looking at what other municipalities in the region and other similarly sized municipalities, what their charters look like. And I imagine that's what that training is. Okay, so.
So I would suggest that there's a couple of different resources that we have used that I can forward to people to review in your own time, and then we could set up a time to perhaps field questions that people might have about our form of government and other forms of government. But built into that too would be some discussion about election rules, because there are some limitations in terms of what your authority is regarding just how far you go for a change. So we have the right to change our charter, but we don't have a right under this context to necessarily change the form of government. That's a different approach. And that requires an entirely different method of election, but it's worth talking about. So those are the sorts of things that I would include in here, is some discussion about the election rules and that sort of thing. But I'm happy to set that up, send you guys some homework in advance just to give you some reading that I guarantee will put you to sleep. But again, we'll give you some sense of what the markers are. Okay. Happy to do.
Yeah, I would like to see training on more detailed training about the model of government we have, the city manager, council situation. I'm not as interested in those we don't have.
Yeah, I think all three of these topics.
I think all three are.
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I assume if we think of anything else, we can turn it over to
Yeah,
our,
I think that things
make
as
our
we go
requests.
along That we'd like more education on, can we always ask for more?
Yeah, no, I think all of them would be very helpful. And so how would we go?
So
That-
if you all say that's what you want, then we'll make sure we get it on your next agenda and make sure that that's the first thing that we talk about.
Okay,
But in the meantime, I will get the links or the paperwork that we will email to you all electronically, so you can read up on these things in advance.
okay. So do we need to vote on adopting those
No, I think
agenda
at this
items?
point, it's just a matter of getting an idea of what you want to hear. So we're just looking
Okay.
for direction
Mhm.
rather than.
Okay. Is there anything else on here that's not listed that anybody's interested in?
Just a question, I'm sure. On the diversity, equity, inclusion aspect, would that be a training that is done by council or how would that be done?
Madam Chair.
Mhm.
So part of that is up to this body, of course, but really the DEI, and as I was envisioning to put on here, is through that policy lens. And so there are several trainers that we could have come do it. It also knows how much time this body wants to spend on that, but it would be an outside trainer. We could also do webinars and reading material, but we'll gather a lot of recommendations find for each of these and share those with you. Make that decision.
All right, we'll move on to new business. The review of statutory duties, Charter Review Advisory Board.
So if I may, I direct you to your binders in the section regarding the city charter, section 15.21 and 15.22. They're the very last page 50 of your city charter. So when we talk about statutory duties that you have regarding the charter, they are set by the charter itself. And we have some further illumination about what you do in the code. So we have the ability, because we are a charter city, we have the ability to create our own rules, our own ordinances. They have the same weight as a statute might have, unless they run somehow in opposition to the statutes, and then the statute could take priority for our findings. But it's pretty simple in terms of what you have and what you do. It's all right here, okay? But in its simplicity is your difficulty, because it really doesn't give you a lot of direction. Basically, what it says is that you're being convened for the purpose of reviewing the charter and making recommendations to the council. So within that construct, whatever you do, however you do it, that's completely up to you. Okay, so understand that your authority here is to make a recommendation. So in the end, you're going to be asked to make recommendations, whatever that might be. Everything from, nope, we've looked at it, everything's good, to your imagination is the limit. Okay, so again, it's there, and it's also in the code. I, of course, now don't have Wi-Fi because my phone has gone dead on the hotspot, so I can't get you the code section.
You want the code
But I'll
section?
send it to you. But it's not going to give you much in the way of information either, other than to say there's 9 members appointed by council. And you know, again, you set your own rules and regulations. So it's not going to tell you very much about what you do. But your authority then is to make the recommendation. Is it binding on council? It is not. It's like the planning commission, or it's like, you know, the architectural review board. Those are recommendations that get made to council, and the council decides whether to act on them. And then there are provisions for how those get enacted, you know, whether they have to be, and ultimately any change to the charter has got to go to a vote of the people. Okay. So how that goes, it can be your recommendations that are adopted by council. If council refuses your recommendations or rejects your recommendations, then they don't go that way. There are other ways you can go if you read the charter. So again, there's not a lot there. There's not a lot there, other than to understand that obviously council is interested, because as you know, 2 or 3 years ago now, I guess it's 3 years ago, they put on the ballot the idea that we were going to have a regular meeting of a charter review board. And so, and those are tied into the mayoral elections. And so the idea is to give it a look every now and again. Council had the ability and the authority to do it on their own volition, but in this instance, they decided that it would be better to mandate that we do it on a regular basis. So it's something that they take seriously. This council, the majority of this council that is there now, was a big part of making sure that that got before the voters, and the voters approved it. So again, it is important, even though it is only a recommendation. It is something that council is looking for, because you are supposedly representative of the entire city. And so that voice is a voice that questions I can answer. If it sounds ambiguous, it's because it is.
Any questions? No. We'll review the sunshine and open meeting law next.
So remember, you are, of course, a public body, and as a public body, your business is supposed to be done in the open. That's the whole idea of sunshine. So make sure that you're transparent and make sure that everybody knows exactly what it is. You may or may not, I don't know that we have any participants. Is that 11 or 1? We have 1, or I'm sorry, we have 3 attendees. There will be times, again, when people will show up. There may be issues that you may put on the agenda that will cause people to show up. You may, for instance, if you decide to look at the initiative and referendum section, that's probably going to engender some interest by the public that you're going to be speaking to. The idea here is to make sure that everything we do is done so that they can see. Nothing's behind closed doors. You'll be astonished at how many people will not have paid attention to what you do until you get to the point where they decide that they are interested. And then they'll say, well, this has all been done behind closed doors. And of course, it's not. Everything's been done. We're filming these things. We're recording these things. I don't know how much more open we can be. So your idea is to make sure that you're accountable. If you go to a park and people want to talk to you about being on this board, absolutely talk about it. There's nothing that prohibits you from doing that. Sunshine does not prohibit that. If there's more than a quorum at a party and people want to talk about it generally, that's not a problem. If they want to talk about how you're going to vote, that does become a problem. So the business of this board, this commission, needs to be done here, and it needs to be done here. Just keep that in mind. But that also applies to things like your emails. Now, obviously, we will send you information. You'll get it electronically. You may see on these things that we're including Katie Nakazono on this thing because we want to make sure that we are maintaining the record. To make sure that if I'm sending a link to you regarding what are the forms of government in Missouri, anybody can find that link, and we're going to keep them as part of the records of this organization. If you're going to communicate by email, which makes you human, then again, you can do that. But if you're communicating for the purpose of discussing how people are going to vote, I would heavily discourage that, okay? And I would discourage it, not prohibit it, but discourage it, because again, it makes it sound like you're doing business outside of this group, okay? So for the purposes of council, we try and give them email addresses, city email addresses, so that we can always archive this information. If you are going to be communicating about things, other than talking about the soccer game last Saturday or whatever it might be, then I would also encourage you to include Katie on your emails. That way they're automatically being archived, and that way there's no question that what we're doing. So again, as long as you keep in mind transparency, the whole concept of sunshine, that's why we call it sunshine. Again, it's not hard to do. There is a publication there's a handbook that you can get, but it's also online. It's published by the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office outlines the statutory sections in section 610 of the Missouri Revised Code. The provisions that apply to open meetings are the only thing you need to read. But again, it'll outline very generally what's an open meeting and what's a closed meeting. I can't conceive of a circumstance where you as a board or commission would have a closed meeting. There's no purpose to that here, okay? None of the things you'd be talking about would fit into section 610.021, which is closed meetings and closed records. So unless you got into something that had to do with personnel and you wanted information about individual personnel and that sort of thing, but that's a far stretch. So again, I can't imagine why you need it closed, but if you did, there's a provision for that, and I would be happy to direct you in that regard to make sure you comply with it. So it's not particularly difficult. The idea is just do your business here, and if you work from that mantra, I think everything else is going to follow. Questions? Yes, sir.
Will we have city email accounts, or do I have to use our personal accounts?
I would encourage you to use your personal accounts. We can create city accounts for you, but not easy. So again, I would tell you that it's probably easier just to include Katie on your personal emails. So I don't anticipate there to ever be litigation over what you do, because what you're going to do ultimately is make a recommendation.
I'm more interested in whether the community can contact us.
Okay. So,
Without, having our personal, I can get a new email address.
So what I would tell you is, if folk want to contact you, there's a way to do that, and that is to actually attend meetings the way they're doing it, or they can send an email to Katie, who's the city clerk, who can make sure that you as a commission get your emails so that you can address them in the meetings. Okay, or she can forward them on to you if they were received by her. I think it's better to have a collection point that then gets distributed to the interested individuals. But I also think, if it's so, for instance, if it's to you directly, Matthew, then again, I would anticipate she would send it to you directly. If it's to the council, then everybody should get it. Okay, but one way or another, if she's the collection point, we've archived. Does that make sense?
What about having a council email address.
You mean a charter
Yeah,
commission?
yeah, charter
Charter
commission.
commission email address, a single one that would go to Katie.
And then
that
be
Katie
forwarded
then
to all of
would
us,
sell.
or it would do that automatically.
Madam Chair. So that will be what we do. There is a charter review advisory board webpage already where we'll be adding all of the materials are there already. As we move forward, we will continually update it. There will be an email link there and it will work exactly as you all described. It will be Katie, and then Katie will disperse it to the appropriate parties.
So the answer is yes.
So, for example, if the board decides they want to go meet with a group in South Webster, that would require the 24-hour notice and,
Be required to post it.
and,
Be a public meeting. We'd have to have it at a place where it would be accessible to the public,
okay,
either in person or vice versa.
okay.
Who is responsible for the posting of the agenda and the minutes and?
The city. So you as a group will say, our next meeting is on whatever date. Now, the chair controls the meeting. So the chair can ask that there be a meeting set. And again, we can do things like doodle polls to make sure that people are available, that sort of thing. But again, it is incumbent upon the city to make sure that those postings occur. We're not throwing you to the wolves. All right? It's yours, Kyle. You got to make sure that.
That's what I was worried about.
I
I feel like I have a vested interest.
Nails and you go out and put it on the door. Yeah. No, it's not, but we'll take care of that. That's not something you need to worry.
So you were very explicit when you said it was the discussion of how you're going to vote. So if it is a discussion about the concept or the idea or the changes, that's okay. It's only if I say, will you vote for this or not vote for this? That has to be done publicly.
I would tell you that's the line that I would ask you not to cross.
Right.
Okay.
Fair enough.
But again, that's really the key, because you don't want people to think that these decisions are made in the smoke filled rooms, right? And again, it's just to make sure that we don't have any appearances of impropriety. That's all.
Unlike the rest of the governments in the world.
Yes, don't.
We won't go there. Are we okay on this section? Everybody's okay? Okay. Discussion of the binder materials. You,
Madam Chair.
yes,
So it's self-explanatory for the most part. I won't read each of your tabs to you. Well, actually, I won't read them to you, but for the public, so they know what you have, I will read that the binders at this point consist of the welcome and roster, the city charter, which of course is online in a couple different places with the links, the ordinance for adding the additional members and that creates the charter, as well as recommendations from staff and council on perhaps what this body may take up to review in terms of charter amendments. There's also just a quick 2-pager on the sunshine law, and there's all kinds of information if you'd like additional content on sunshine law, also happy to provide that. Just a quick 1-pager on Robert's Rules of Order. There also is an endless amount of information on that if you would like more. And then there's just a quick page from ICMA, which is the International City and County Managers Association. Plethora of information on different forms of relationships for governments between councils and managers. There's just a 1-pager in there. You also have a brief handout on the front of your folder. That 1-pager has several links on it. So if you peruse it and there's something that you would like to have printed out, I'm happy to do so. Again, it is the professional organization for cities and counties that every city and county for the most part uses as well. And then, of course, there's the printout of the model city charter. We'll continue to add tabs as you all move forward and decide what you would like added in there. So I wanted to go through that with you as well as, and Madam Chair, this is up to your group. It's got review the current charter. Each of you, of course, reviewed the charter on throw in your name and then hats to be part of this group. Dependent on where you want to start your next meeting. Some of that discussion needs to occur just in terms of agenda preparation, that sort of thing. But happy to walk through any of the sections that you all have questions about. Certainly was not going to go through each of them with you. And then it might be helpful to go through that discussion with the charter considerations that were presented by council staff.
yes.
Chair. Give it back to you.
Okay, thank you. So do you want to, as I understand, you want to do that at a next meeting, review the suggestions or
No, I'm happy to do that now.
to do that now? Go
Would you
ahead.
like to do
please.
that? So the first part of the recommendations. Much of this was voted on and blocked by the council, and that's because you'll see that the staff recommendations that have the F's there in parentheses behind them. The staff recommendations are mostly pretty technical, just in terms of cleanup. Eliminate section 2.11 and restate the meeting schedule determined by council. Those are really technical things, and that I think will need at some point in direction, those type of technical things actually have to go to the vote. So those are items that you all can discuss. I won't go through each of those, but certainly you can, and as a group, we should do that. My intent isn't to read them all to you, though. Another example of just some of the technical language, there's some of the provisions that have all masculine language, which was appropriate or maybe not appropriate, but in 1954 when it was adopted, that was the composition of who worked for city government. So those things have changed. So again, just an example of the technical language. We get into the more substantive recommendations, and most of those were put forth perhaps by council, and you all may certainly differ, but I think one of the largest considerations that is substantial is 2.1, which is considering at-large versus board-based elections. So that will probably require a lot of discussion if that's something that this body decides to take up. Then you can again read through the list and see what those powers of council, what does the manager form of government look like, revising and updating department names, to keep the departments in the charter, or does that become ordinance?
Dr. Peoples, if I might.
Yes.
If you're looking at these, what are labeled larger policy items, most of these did come from council members. They were all voted on by council to send forward to you. You'll notice that in many cases, it's just take a look at this section and see what you think. Is it up to date? So there's not necessarily a prescriptive recommendation for a lot of these. One of the things I'd call your attention to is 2.2, 2.13, and 3.5 all have to do with powers of the mayor, the city manager, and the city council. No one from council is suggesting that anyone wants to get rid of the council manager form of government. This is only a recommendation to council to see if all those powers seem to be in balance where we are in current government. I just didn't want anyone to misinterpret that as let's change that council manager, that the council is asking for a change in governmental structure in that way. Council is not, simply a review of some of those powers to make sure they fit the way modern city government works.
And I have a thought about perhaps what you might find a good way to move forward. It's, again, you're looking at this and it seems overwhelming. Where does one start? What's the first step in a situation like this? And perhaps the first step is to have these conversations about the forms of government and exactly how it works, because you need some context from which to read and assess these things. So if we provide that context and perhaps provide that background, some of the issues might become a little clearer as you go forward. You might look at things a little bit differently and read them in a different light. So part of what we're trying to do is, again, we're asking people who don't do this on a regular basis to come in and make deep dives into this information and make recommendations. And you may not yet have the perspective to do that. So don't be afraid of that. Again, embrace it. And that's part of the idea of saying, look, tell us what you want to see, what you want to hear. And we'll make sure you have that so that you can make assessments and determine what is useful and what's not. So maybe having in the first meeting, doing nothing more than talking about the form of governments, we can talk about that and have everyone talk about the role of mayor, talk about the role of council, talk about the role of the city manager. Again, all of those things I think are very important. Talking about just what a charter is, I think is very important. And understanding the statutory powers that having a charter gives to you is very, very important. Again, understanding some of the election rules and where your limits might be and how people get to vote on these things, again, might affect what you look at and what you think is important. So maybe the next meeting is just that. is to talk about those sorts of things to give you all a little bit of structure. Just a suggestion.
I think it's a good suggestion. There's a lot to digest here. Does anyone have any comments on that, Matthew?
So looking at the details, I think is absolutely important, but one of the things that I feel that I need is some understanding of where the city wants to go. So the preamble is anemic at best. And it seems to me that that really would define how the goals set there would define how we think about the rest of these things. Just thinking about the rest of things without knowing where we want to go is not very useful.
So let me say this one thing, and then I'm going to turn it over to the mayor.
Okay.
The charter doesn't, that's not how it works. It's not what council or the city wants to do. It's what you, as a member of the city, want to do.
Mhm.
All right. So again, the perspective is different. And
Right.
it would be hard for me to put in the preamble, this is what Matthew wants to do.
No, but no, I'm saying that we need to talk about
I
that
agree.
before doing,
I
before
agree.
making other kinds of decisions.
I agree.
need
I'm
that.
sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, no.
But the key here is to make sure that, again, there's nothing coming from council that says you must.
Right.
It's all about what do you all think is important? And that's, I'd leave it there. It's really up to you.
So in the absence of anything else, I think you do have to work with the current mission statement. Having said that, the council is right now in the process of, and we will meet Saturday, to really dig in on a mission and vision statement. So whereas at the moment, you maybe don't have some of those guiding values that I think you're in search of, I expect that within the next couple of months, we will. I certainly do believe that there is, if you go and look on the city website right now, there's a set of goals for the city council, and that will be instructive in the meantime. But I do think that we'll have a little bit more for you in the upcoming months.
I have a question. Are there required things that have to be in charter by state law or anything else?
Well, yes, you have to outline what your form of government is, and then you have to outline what the powers are of the individuals that are there, that you're including in that power structure.
It seems to me in reading through it as a general statement, it's much more descriptive than like the US Constitution. And like, why should it say which departments you should have, for example, how they're run? And so it's much more particular than what I'm used to seeing.
If I might suggest, Madam Chair, in addition to the general topics we've talked about, it would be good to talk about the difference between a charter and an ordinance.
Right.
And what belongs in a charter and what can be done by ordinance, and what that means for how flexible or easily changed it is.
So,
Because that's a little bit of what you're doing.
It's very prescriptive, you know, and you really, I guess it gets back to what Matthew said, what does a council want? Because if I was on the council, I don't know if I want the charter to say what departments I have to have, you know, times change and you know, you want to have the flexibility with the consent of the voters to do something else. Or that the city manager has to live in the city or what have you. It's pretty particular.
it is. And if you read the Missouri Constitution, you want to see particular, there it is, as opposed to the United States Constitution, right? But it's rare that you see something that lasts 287 years, so, or however many it has been. But the truth of the matter is, you're right, it is specific, but it is specific because people need to understand where the lines are. And again, part of the reason, you know, this would have been done in 1954, I guess it was, that the charter was granted. Part of the reason it was done the way it was done was because it was still something of a novelty. We didn't have charter cities until 1945, and that was part of the Constitution. Now I think there are 33 cities in the state that have charter forms. Not a lot, right? And again, part of the publications that will send you have that information, and it will tell you about those things. But what the mayor has said is very, very important too, is that a charter is like a constitution. And so it is not designed to, and it shouldn't be designed to include very specific items because things change. And so you want something that is changeable, something that's flexible. You want something that's written generically to cover as much time as you possibly can. If it's well written, then you can do those things. You know, again, if it has lots of specific things, that's harder to do. So we can talk about that. I can build that into the next meeting, because I think that is part of the workup to forms of government.
Mhm.
We can talk about what a charter is.
Yeah, and I think part of our role is we certainly want to hear what council wants, but we also want to give to council what we hear and gather from the city. What do our people living here want? And I think that, we have the Hicks survey that gave recommendations for the city as far as diversity and inclusion and equity. We have the Model Cities Charter that has a lot of language that's more up to date and takes those into consideration. So I think that this is a big puzzle that we have to put together and come up with a recommendation.
Can I ask a question,
Sure.
Dr. Peoples? Is that the correct way to address you, to ask her?
Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned, I think you
Yeah, we're
informal. Okay, we're all friends.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, I think you said 33 cities use the charter form of government. Is that
So the city attorney used that number, and I don't know that I would trust that, but.
okay?
You want to know what I call her?
I apologize.
So in all seriousness, I'm not sure the exact number, but we are unique in that there are very few, when you consider how many cities there are in the state of Missouri that have a charter, and unique in a good way. Just in terms of the majority of cities I have run across would prefer to be a charter city. There's many protections in that, if you will, for the residents and the services that are received and how we operate.
So I imagine this will, and if I'm jumping onto the training that we're going to get, then stop me, but is it based on why are there only 33? Is it
10,000 or more?
okay?
So it's cities.
So every city in Missouri over 10,000 is charter.
Could.
Can, okay.
So for a long time, it was just Kansas City and St. Louis that were charter forms, but now Columbia, Webster, and St. Louis County was several. But yeah, I think my number is good.
I trust you.
Probably is. I retract.
It's a unique form, but it gives you a lot of power. And again, because we have all of the powers that are granted to the legislature. So again, we pass an ordinance, and of course it only applies to Webster Groves, but we pass an ordinance, and that ordinance has the force of law.
So in the absence of a charter, how does the city operate?
There are what we call statutory cities. So and statutory cities are also assigned by size, and they have specific sections in the revised statutes which tell you how to run. But the form of government is different than the statutory powers of government. So again, you can be a statutory city and still be a city manager council form of government. That's still up to the folk in the town to make decisions. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Good.
Let's see, we were going to circle back to future meeting schedule. And so I think what we'll do is the recommendation is to go over the forms of government and what a charter is. And as far as timing, how long do you think you would need to present that?
I'm going to send you a publication, and then I'll give you a summary form. I think I can do it in less than 30 minutes.
Okay.
So Madam Chair, in terms of considering when you may want your meetings to be, staff will be as flexible as we can be. There are a couple of dates that we just couldn't, and that's because of the use of this room. So I would ask that we avoid the first and third Tuesday of the month in the evening. If you want to meet during the day, we could, but council, of course, has their meetings the first and third. So
Yeah.
they will be in here. And then on court nights, which we, Eric, is that the first?
It's generally the second and fourth, but there are some months where it switches Wednesdays. So
But that's, yes, so generally, every other, if you wanted to have evening meetings, we can make the space available. Daytime meetings, we can make the space available.
Okay. So, I guess the best thing would be like you did before to see availability.
I am happy to send out doodle polls. I was hoping to get a sense, because I was just honestly just kind of some efforts to see what people preferred, and I didn't really walk away with a consensus. So do you all
Okay.
prefer daytime meetings? We prefer evening meetings, or kind of mid between, like 4 to 6, like today. Are there days of the week that work better for others? So I was hoping to get some of that to refine the doable.
Okay. What does everybody think about timing? I mean, I'm pretty flexible, but I know other people work and have other commitments. Pardon me?
Yeah, this is a good time.
Okay.
Yeah, I like 4 to 6 also.
For me, and at least in my work situation, this 4 to 6 will work once in a while.
Mhm.
I would prefer evenings, if we can intersperse that,
Okay.
down the road.
What time does evening mean to you?
Well, Between 6 and midnight.
Evening.
I have to agree with, is it Joseph?
Joe.
Yeah, okay, Joe. My schedule is all over the place, work schedule. So
Okay.
sometimes 4 is great and
Yeah.
sometimes evening is better.
Okay. Kyle.
I can make any time after 4 work.
Okay.
There is 5 better than 6, Joe.
That gets back, yes, that helps.
It's closer.
Yeah. I work downtown, so.
Oh, traffic.
At least for those jobs,
Yeah.
for the days that I'm in the office. 2 days a week I'm at home.
So it's evenings 5 to 7, 6 to 8, 7 to 9. I draw the line at 9 to 11.
Are there regular days of the week that you are working from home instead of coming?
Mondays is stress.
Yeah, of all the times that we've sort of discussed, like Mondays 4 to 6 would be a good one for me. I like the 4 to 6 or 5 to 7, but Mondays are,
You have trouble with holidays,
I'm sorry?
that we run into
Yeah, we have some
holidays. but-
holidays, yeah, but those are usually, well, we know when they are.
You want to look at a Monday, 5 to 7?
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
There's also the option of Zoom. I certainly hear the traffic concerns, which that is a discussion for you all to have. Obviously, we have some capabilities because we have the public watching, but would you want to allow members to participate via Zoom? We can easily do that. But that's up to you all.
I think we have to, if we're looking at business schedules. I work full time in the day. I'm here because it's been out.
Oh.
Yeah.
So I think that looking at the first group of topics.
Mhm.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay,
Yep.
so Mondays 5 to 7, I'll throw out some dates and if someone needs to attend by Zoom. Hearing that that's okay with this group.
Just a question, in terms of frequency, what are we looking, are we looking at a monthly sort of thing, or does the cadence need to be faster than that?
Yeah, I was wondering if with this much front loaded education, so we kind of understand what we're doing, are we suggesting that that might be a little more frequent than once a month? Just so that we can fit everything in within like a 12-month period?
I think that's up to you all.
So there are 15 articles in the preamble to talk about in terms of, in the city charter. And we have 12 months in which to do that. So really, we'd almost have to meet bi-weekly, at least to begin with, to get started and see how long that's going to take. But if we do monthly, I don't see any way that we could finish doing that.
Well, I'm not sure every article needs a whole
Absolutely.
2-hour session. I think a
yeah,
punch we can
absolutely,
compress,
yes,
yeah.
But I don't know that. So,
Well, I would prefer to be more frequently, at least at the beginning and, kind of get a jump on it and see how we do.
So I'm hearing the consensus is bi-weekly, trying for Mondays, 5 to 7. Is that okay?
Does that,
So would
I
that
mean-
fit us on Halloween for the next meeting?
You have to dress up.
And that's just direction that you're giving
Yeah.
to the city, so that's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or maybe every 3 weeks, something like that,
Yeah.
kind of.
I
Split
would
the
be a
baby a
little
little.
better with 3 weeks. I'm gonna be out of town for a while and won't be back left in November.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe we do that so we get a handle on what our approach is going to be and then.
Yeah.
stay
how
tuned.
quickly could you have the trainings ready?
Well, I can have it ready pretty quickly. This Monday would be out, but I could do it a week from Monday, which would be the 3rd. Or I can do it the next week after that, which is November or first. You guys want to do that on Halloween? don't you? Yeah.
So obviously, we will skip Halloween. I think from a
Yeah.
staff perspective, and I need to look at calendars. I think we can accommodate bi-weekly. Most times, there may be some times where it needs to go out
Yeah.
3 weeks or we won't have availability, but I'll put all that.
Yeah, I think as long as we're condensing our time and with some flexibility, we can get this done.
The other thing, the 2-hour mark, that again was just a first attempt. Should the body want to meet for a longer period of time, you certainly can. Meetings could be 5 to 8, or if you get here at 7 and the business isn't done, you can continue having the dialogue and discussion.
Right.
But if you set a meeting for 2 hours, don't feel compelled to use the 2 hours.
No one has ever complained about getting out of a meeting early.
As long as they're over by 10, I'm good.
So the consideration of agenda items for the next meeting, we do have the trainings. Is there anything else that we are ready to put on the agenda?
I didn't hear what you said. Could you say it again?
I said, we, for content for the next meeting, the agenda, we have the trainings. Are there other things that are ready to put on the agenda that you would like to put forth?
Are we, oh, go
Just
ahead.
to clarify, what date are we looking for the next meeting? In 2 weeks, potentially? Is that? what we're
Yeah,
looking at? 2 or 3 weeks? Potentially.
24th, October 24th.
And then I guess the question is, would staff be able to provide those trainings on that short time frame, or would we need looking something further out
I think we can do part of it.
or some?
We can certainly do a very with some.
I can certainly cover forms of government and concepts regarding the charter, structure of the charter. I can certainly cover that.
And a lot of that is what you did earlier.
And again, I'll get you guys the publications, which is why I think I can short them, because they're good. They're not long, and they're common sense. They're not full of technical jargon, which I'll be very careful about saying real word.
If you send it out in advance, like I won't be able to be live and present, but if you send it out in advance and I have any questions, can I send those? before?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And I'll make sure everybody has my email. You guys can send me email, and I will in turn make sure that Katie has that covered before me. I'll forward it on. But if you have questions that you want to address in advance of the meeting, you want me to be able to address, I'm happy to do that.
I like to suggest like the first and third Monday of the month.
I think that might work for the rest of the year, and we might be able to
Yeah.
cut back to monthly
Right.
by then, because I don't think we have any Monday holidays between now and
Yeah.
the end of the year. It's really a pretty short period of time.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm okay with initially try that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Are we talking about the 5 to 7 time, basically?
I think was a consensus.
Mel, does that work for you, or do you need more like a 5:30?
All right.
I have a
So-
question about the diversity inclusion training. So when I have done those before, those have been all day or weekend workshops. Is that the sort of thing you are thinking of? Or do you, because those have been the ones that have been impactful.
Sure. That's a great question. Thank you. And not to punt, but again, a lot of that is up to you all. How much time do you have to invest in it? I will do the research and see, because again, the focus is through the policy and it's not all encompassing DEI type work, which certainly I totally agree with you is more intensive. Allows more opportunity. Not that policy work should not be more intensive, but I don't know the best. So I would leave it to you all once I bring back the resources, and what I bring back may not be exactly what you're looking for. There are several local trainers that could also come do it in person. I believe council did allocate some budget. I know they allocated budget. I don't know the wrong number. Eric, was it 5,000?
5,000.
So there is some funding that this council can decide how to use. Would that be for you guys? May also want to talk about that in terms of public engagement.
Sure.
Mhm.
This raises just the question I guess we haven't discussed is the budget that's available to the commission here in order to do either trainings or public engagement of some sort. Is there a little more explanation that we can have on that?
Sure. I'm happy to. So there, in terms of council, mayor concerned with, there were not parameters put on in terms of how the city goes about procuring and engaging trainers to go follow our normal processes. So out of discussions from here, we'll just take what it is that you want to do and we'll make it work on the city. And I would encourage anybody, so I'll say this, although I don't think I need to, please don't spend any of your personal dollars. If we know that we're doing something, we would be reimbursed. So we would ask that anything that needs to be purchased, that's what it's.
So could you just briefly, sorry, explain what public engagement would look like in that context?
So that's on my list of things. You all get to decide what public engagement looks like, whether it's having public hearings where people come testify before you, whether it's meeting the public in smaller places individually or in small groups. That's your decision. It is, however, priority from the council that you do some of this public engagement. Because the expectation is you are representing the public in this and you got to talk to them or hear from them in some way in order to do that. So that will be set by you. I'm certain that if you're interested, city manager and I come and our public engagement person, Jenny Starkey, could give you some ideas about options if that would be useful to you.
We include that with the next meeting would
Mhm.
be,
Sorry, I just
especially
used
in
that
terms
word.
of the diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, to have some suggestions of what public engagement might look like.
Sure, be happy to. We can definitely include that. The only, not even caveat I would say, you all may decide you want to do the small group stuff, but remember those are still public meetings.
Mhm.
They have to be accessible. So if you're gonna,
Even though we're not talking about voting,
yes, because all the meetings are public. So
Okay.
have it, at
get
Mr.
the whole
Evers'
community
home,
to
he
do
has
that kind of
to be
training.
If I could just go back to the funding for a second. There are no parameters from council on how that is spent. The logic from council was if you need expertise or training or equipment or materials, that we wanted you to have what you needed to do the job that you have in front of you. So really, I would consult with the city manager in terms of purchasing of things, but we did not set any rules or limits on that, except a dollar amount. And I will ask you to stay within the dollar amount, please. It is, after all, a tight budget situation.
But I'd like to suggest to have a meeting like over at the Rexplex, because I know a lot of citizens, they feel intimidated by coming to City Hall. For some it is. I mean, look at our council meetings, how many citizens show up for that?
I suggest wellness, but that's.
So, suggest like over at the Rexplex or so, I don't know how that works with the budget as far as getting a room over there or a couple of rooms.
So thank you, Mr. Manager. I apologize, ma'am.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I like Robert's.
Yeah.
It keeps me in order. So thank you. In terms of the Recplex, certainly don't have any strong opposition to doing that. It is much harder to schedule because there's already classes and people rent it out and book it out. So we could look at some Monday meetings. Can't guarantee that that would work. The other difficulty is the AV technology and getting it over there. So not impossible, but it's a little bit more challenging. And again, the larger challenge is that most of those rooms are booked, but we can look, knowing that Mondays from 5 to 7 is what this group would like, see what availability there is.
And I just to make one thing clear, not all of your engagement with the public has to be in this formal where you were all recording and with microphones. You all can come up with different ways of engaging at the Recplex at a different time of day, perhaps, or wherever else, the library, wherever people are comfortable.
We could promote it like a town hall meeting. That way it's not an official meeting of the Charter Review Board. It's just a public engagement for public, for the public to come.
But it would
Yeah.
it would still be a meeting. So we'd still have to post it and say there's a meeting, come to the meeting, and we still have minutes. Kyle still has to work. If we have all of that. But again, it can still, don't think that that's too formal. I mean, it's not. It can be any way you want to run the meeting. And we keep kicking that back at you guys, saying it's up to you, but that's because that's what the charter says. We're not trying to punt it. We're trying to make sure, and we'll give you as much structure or help you with as much structure as you all want, but it really does come down to you.
Do we have a shared place to put files that we'd like to share with each other? And do we have a shared directory someplace?
Great question. We'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Well, so that's what I'm thinking, but I don't know that. Were you asking about a place where you could upload materials?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we can easily, what the mayor was saying, there is already a charter review advisory board webpage. If you send Katie those materials that you're interested in sharing, she can easily upload those. My pause was, do we have a place where you all can upload materials?
Yeah. Well, so I was thinking of, if we have an idea for something we would like to share with people before the meeting, putting them in a shared directory where we could all look at them would be much more efficacious than sending out dozens of emails. And
It's transparent.
Mhm. Does the city use Google or Microsoft Office products? Because those
Now,
okay.
Until recently, we used carrier pigeons.
Because there are certainly ways with that to allow us to communicate with one another and share stuff.
Something though that the public would see before we had even seen it and discussed it? Or are we talking about sharing something and then decide, then it would be shared?
Again, it could be contemporaneous, it could be posted. This is something I want to talk about next time. Gives everybody advance notice if it's there. Again, but it would be theoretically published by individual members who are simply saying this is something we're going to talk about at the next meeting. That's how I understand that.
Yes. I'm sorry, just to clarify, that would be available to the public to see too.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's not like.
Yeah, I
sharing
wasn't
a
gonna-
document just
Right.
on mission.
Right. We would have read-write access and the public would have read access.
in terms of the agenda setting, Madam Chair, that may be a discussion that you want to have. Because I don't know how things get on the agenda. Would you want members, any member's idea gets on the agenda? Would it need to be a quorum? Would you need a second for things to be on the agenda? So that's probably a needed discussion as well.
Any thoughts on that?
I think it'd get a little unwieldy if all of us every 2 weeks threw in our agenda items. I think it might be better if we kind of had some consensus about what we wanted to talk about. And there's always, new business section, I would assume, of the meeting where people could bring stuff up and chat briefly about whether we might want to add it later.
So is it the chair and the co-chair then that would make the agenda for the meetings? So then we would maybe submit things to.
I was just going to suggest that maybe that could work very well if people filter in things that they want to put on the agenda, and we can see how it fits in.
And then each meeting, you would talk about what would be on the next agenda, so everybody has a chance to filter it.
Right, if you keep your agenda set for the next meeting and not.
Right.
really time to set it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
right.
So if we are submitting things prior to a meeting that the public has access to, is the public also going to have ways of trying to suggest things prior to a meeting?
Only by email,
Only by email to the.
right, to the webpage that would then be available to you all. And you all can accept it or not, follow it or not. That's it.
And that's a process that we currently use, so we'll not get a heavy lift for the public to know how to contact us. So those come in through a generic email. Katie disseminates them to the appropriate parties. So it sounds laborious, but it really isn't. That's her role, and she's incredibly skilled at it. There's nobody better.
So in the event that that website receives a contact from the public, is that contemporaneously sent to all of us, or do we review that at the next meeting?
So it depends on
Was our
what that
decision.
inquiry is. If someone writes into that generic email and says they specifically have a question for you, Katie would forward it to you. Neil is usually copied on things as chair, however that goes. But typically people want the entire group to know. And so everybody gets that correspondence
At the meeting, or they send it via
in
email?
ahead of time. Real-
Okay.
in
Well,
real time is it's read.
Typically, just as a council member, once a week or in anticipation of your meeting, you get everything grouped. So you're not going to get one after the other email forwarded to you by Katie. Typically, they're grouped together.
Anything else?
I would just suggest in building the agenda that reviewing those would be a standing item,
The
the
submittals?
batch of
Yeah.
whatever comes in.
Right. Okay. So I think we're down to the next regular meeting and we're gonna decide when that is, and now we're on to adjournment.
I'll make a
Unless there's
motion.
Further
No, sorry.
discussion? Was that a motion?
It was, but I realized I might be jumping. the gun a
Okay.
little.
Is there a second to adjourn?
Oh, to adjourn?
Mhm.
Yeah.
We still have.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? No. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.